This lesson in our series on the Calvary Chapel Distinctives is from Chapter 4, Building the Church God's Way. Chuck learned a lot of lessons over the years that led him to this idea that we want to leave room for God to build his church. I've always loved the story Chuck tells about how God provided for the property on Fairview and Sunflower. Here's an excerpt from the book. Chuck writes this: "At the time Fairview Street had just been completed through to Sunflower, I used to drive up to the corner of Fairview and Sunflower on my way from the other chapel. As I waited for the green arrow to turn left, I'd look over at this huge field and begin to panic. I thought, God has been good to us. We've paid off all the debts. We don't owe anything. We have $60,000 in the bank. We're running a surplus, and things are going so well. What am I doing to this flock of people, putting them into debt along with the potential of having to build on this? What am I doing? Where is my head?" I would go into this cold sweat trying to figure the thing out. And then the Lord would speak to my heart and say, "Chuck, whose church is it?" And this is a picture of what would happen just a few months later. That line has always encouraged me when we as a church have faced challenges. Whose church is it? It's Jesus' church. God is able to take care of his church, and it would be good for us to learn how to step back enough to leave room for him to work. Some of you may have a ministry you're involved in or leading. It's a good thing to ask yourself the same question. Whose church is it? Calvary Chapel of Fullerton has a few stories of how God has taken care of us. Here's one. In 1998, Calvary Chapel of Fullerton moved from meeting at the Fullerton YMCA to a unique brick building known as the Ice House, located down by the train station. We were at the Ice House for 6 years. At the end of our lease, we were faced with a decision over whether to renew our lease with a significant rent increase or to move. Our landlords had been part of a renovation project for that area, and the entire barrio that surrounded the church had been torn down, and they were going to build brand new 3-story condos. This is a picture of what would eventually take place. For a while, we thought it might be neat to stay put and find ourselves in a brand new neighborhood without even moving. But the thing that changed our mind was when our landlord sold off the church's parking lot. We decided it was time to move. As we got closer to the end of our lease, we made an arrangement with our landlords to go month to month, and we promised to give them 3 months' notice if we found a new place, and they in turn would do the same if they found a new tenant. Yet, before our original lease had expired, they reneged on the deal, and we found that we only had 6 weeks to find a new place to move to. Now, back up 2 weeks before this had happened. Caleb had signed he and I up for to go to the Fullerton Mayor's prayer breakfast. And it was at this breakfast that I just happened to meet Pastor Larry Bogardus from St. Stephen's Lutheran Church on Chapman. Larry shared with me how his church was only 6 months away from closing their doors because of finances. And so I prayed with him for God to help him in his church. When our crisis hit 2 weeks later, the thought occurred to me to call up Pastor Larry and see if they would be interested in renting to us. He said yes. We moved into the Lutheran Church, and that would be our home for the next 16 years. We learned that God knows how to take care of his church. Now, will God take care of us now that we're kind of back in the same situation where we're going to need to move again? Well, I suspect he will. We found out that where God guides, God provides. And by the way, that's one of Chuck's famous quotes. That's a Chuckism. Building the church is Jesus' job, not ours. He said in Matthew 16:18, "I will build my church." In Acts 2:47, it says, "And the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved." Now, in the Calvary Chapel Distinctives, Chuck also made another statement, another Chuckism. He said, "Strive to gain, strive to maintain." And the idea is this: if you're going to build your church or your ministry through man-conceived plans and hype, you're going to have to also work hard to maintain that in that ministry. Be careful about pursuing the hype to build a ministry. It might be some sort of a gimmick. Chuck used to talk about churches that would hold attendance contests. Maybe they would promise a new bike to the child who brought the most friends with him to Sunday school. Maybe it was a competition with another church, a competition where the churches are more concerned about numbers than about souls. Some churches have built themselves upon the type of hype that gets blamed on the Holy Spirit. Years ago, there was this movement called holy laughter, where some churches claimed that this crazy, drunken-like laughter was proof of the Holy Spirit, and since they have it, you ought to be there. Later, it was this sort of magical dust, gold dust, that people claim would fall upon people who were baptized by the Holy Spirit. I hate to say this, but I'm afraid that some churches can abuse the teachings about the signs of the times as a way to draw a crowd. Don't misunderstand me here. We believe that Jesus is indeed coming back very soon. That's one of our distinctives. Yet the temptation is for the pastor to come up with some new finding, some new news thing that's the latest thing, something that makes the church think that they have true insider knowledge when it comes to the end times. And you will see pastors make all sorts of claims, stir up all sorts of fears, and there aren't too many people who will hold them accountable to their claims. Chuck says, you run out of the legitimate, you begin to revert to the illegitimate. Now let me just say a word about balance. I've found over the years that there are going to be two extremes when it comes to how you build your church or your ministry. There will be those who will do absolutely nothing in the name of letting God build the church. And there will be those who pull all sorts of tricks out of a hat in order to build the church. Both sides have some legitimacy, but like many doctrines, we need to find the balance. When Moses and the Israelites found themselves pinned against the Red Sea on one side and the advancing Egyptian army on the other, the people complained. And Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. When God has promised to deliver us, we need to be sure to let him do just that. We need to stand still. Stop trying to figure it out. Stop trying to do your thing. And yet, the very next verse, Exodus 14:15, and the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward. See, God's going to do a great, amazing work. He's going to part the Red Sea. And yet the Israelites are going to need to get up, pack up their stuff, and move forward. See, the balance is that sometimes we stand back and we let God work. Other times we need to get up, participate, and get moving. That's balance. When David faced the giant Goliath, David knew where his strength came from. 1 Samuel 17:45. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. David's secret weapon wasn't some super sword. It was God. And yet, David still had to pick up a stone, put it in his sling, and hit the giant. And then he had to run and take Goliath's own sword. He had to kill him. That head didn't just come off by David claiming the name of the Lord. David had to cut it off. May we find balance in our own personal ministries. May we find that place where we are allowing God to be our deliverer, and yet we take the steps we need to do our ministry. Hope that helps.